Hi, this is Christina. I am going to be answering the questions based on my harm reduction damp house project. So Angela had asked why I call it a damp house and where did this term come from. The term has been a long-standing term. I'm not sure where it originally came from, but there are wet houses, dry houses, and damp houses. So wet houses are for tenants that are not expected to be abstinent. They're not expected to be working towards recovery. There's services there, but it's up to the residents whether or not they want to use those services. Dry housing is where tenants are not allowed to drink or use any type of drugs. They have to remain abstinent. They're expected to be clean when they move in, and they need to be working towards the recovery while they're living in this program. And they can be discharged if they refuse treatment or relapse. So damp houses is kind of meeting in the middle. The tenants are not expected to be clean when they enter the program, but we would like them to be actively working towards recovery, whether that means cutting back on the drugs and alcohol or working towards abstinence recovery. We would be willing to work with them at any stage. Another question from Angela is how would we keep the residents safe, considering that they would all be active users? And one of the things that I think it would just be based on whether or not, or based on what the program is willing to do, but a couple of the things that I had come up with was having oversized lockers. You often see homeless people, traveling around with everything they own on their back. So we would have oversized lockers for them to lock their belongings up in overnight. And if they don't have locks, we would provide them for them. We would also have staff in the building 24/7. I do know of programs who allow their staff to sleep at night, and that would not be allowed in the damp house. Staff would be awake 24/7 and doing rounds on the residents to make sure that everything is safe. Rebecca had asked, how does it become known what services each person is already receiving? Is it an honor system of self-reporting, or is this something we would look into? This would definitely be an honor system based that the damp house homeless shelter would not go through insurance. This isn't something that we would be able to look into. However, it would be something that if they move forward with services would obviously be found out when that program is trying to run it through insurance. I currently work in the chemical dependency field here in Rochester, and I know that the field has a very tight-knit community, and I'm assuming that most of the homeless shelters are pretty tight-knit as well. So communication between different programs would definitely be key in ensuring that no one is abusing the services that any program is offering, so that they're not receiving similar services from different programs all at the same time. Would just be something that we would have to try and control through word of mouth. Ryan had asked what percentage of Rochester's homeless population has chronic substance abuse issues. This was a little bit tough for me because I could not find a exact number or statistic for the Rochester area. I was able to find that in 2013 there were 8,857 emergency housing placements. So that is whether it was a homeless shelter, whether it was a family put out by fire or some type of eviction. That is the number that was provided for the year of 2013. There was also a point in time study done in 2013 that found over 1,000 homeless people living on the streets without shelter. So if we were to use that statistics that I came up with in the original project that was given by the annual homeless assessment report to Congress in 2013, saying that 34.7% of homeless people are chronic substance abuse users, then we can estimate that Rochester has approximately 3,000 homeless people that are suffering from substance abuse issues. Ryan's second question was, by creating the damp house, would homeless people who are currently not using substances begin using as they see other homeless people being given opportunities and shelter? Honestly, my hope would be no, that they would not make that choice. If we had someone come to our doors as a homeless shelter that admitted that they were already living a sober life and that they weren't under the influence, we would never tell them that, no, you can't come stay here. If we had a bed, we would allow them to sleep in it, but we would work with that person to find them alternative services so that we would have a bed open the next night for someone who is under the influence and needing someplace to stay. Jen had asked how I think Rochester would react to this idea with a lot of our citizens not having the understanding of potential benefits. with the added stigma attached to drug use. So how have other communities responded to damp houses, and how has this implicated the effectiveness of the approach? So there has been a harm reduction movement across the United States. There are a lot of communities that are using this approach. Homeless shelters are working with housing programs. So from what I have found, there's a few different, nationwide approaches that are being used, whether it's Pathways to Housing or Housing First. They're very similar programs. They're working with damp house homeless shelters to help these people find housing. And their first and main focus is finding housing, followed up by mental health and substance abuse treatment once that shelter or housing unit has been secured for the person. So in 1992, Pathways to Housing opened in New York City, and they have been so successful that in 2007, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration had given them the evidence-based practice approval. So having that understanding and that kind of like seal of approval by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, it would definitely help present this information to the Rochester area. And having, grown up and lived in Rochester and now been back in the Rochester area for a few years now, I can definitely say that I think us as Rochester citizens are ready to try anything at this point to help these people get off the streets. As Anna had mentioned, kind of blending these 2 points together, Buckingham Properties had donated a warehouse a couple winters ago that had opened and was run by the House of Mercy as basically a homeless shelter due to the fact that one of our parking garages had been closed where a lot of homeless people had slept, and it was so cold out that they could not live in what they had then created was Tent City. So they had come up with this sanctuary village where a lot of people were living last winter, and then it was closed in April of 2015 when the weather got nice and we no longer were required to provide housing for them every night because it was no longer cold enough. So I think that we need to come up with a more permanent solution. That sanctuary village was really great for the winter of 2014 and 15 due to the weather, but we need something more permanent for these people. So moving on to Anne's questions, she had asked if there was any literature on harm reduction procedures in informed consent and any guidelines to help explain harm reduction to clients. This is obviously a very, confusing approach to clients. It's, yes, we'll allow you to come live here and stay here at night if you're under the influence, but you can't bring any alcohol or drugs into our facility. You can't use while you're inside the facility. That's very difficult to explain to someone who's currently under the influence or possibly withdrawing. So I think just taking, a patient approach to this and having a solid definition of what your program wants as harm reduction, and explaining to each person every time they walk in the door, knowing that being under the influence yesterday, they may not remember what you told them, and you need to explain it to them again. Also having different rules and policies posted up throughout the shelter so that, the residents have an easier time following them. Anne had also asked how widely accepted harm reduction is among funders for the homeless population. This is a difficult question as well. Honestly, being a homeless shelter, they would never receive funding from anyone like OCFS or DHS. But all of the shelters that I have found and all of the housing programs that I have found have had a wonderful time getting donations from different foundations and different charitable organizations. So there's definitely people out there and programs out there that are willing to invest in this approach, and they're willing to invest in making their communities a better place. So I don't think that... I wouldn't say it's widely accepted, but I don't think that it would be difficult to find funding either. Hopefully that answers everybody's questions. Thanks for watching.